Hello, welcome to Office Hour. Today we are going to talk about UTM codes for social media. So I'm so glad to see people joining us live here in real time. If you would like, I am happy to have you join us here on social media, whether you're on Facebook or you're on LinkedIn or you're in a Facebook group or you're on YouTube, or if you're joining us in the Social Media Pulse community, wherever you're joining us from, happy to have you comment. Let us know. We're monitoring the chat, all the places. But for the sake of trying to funnel people into one place, if you would like to join us in the Social Media Pulse community, the URL for today's Social Media Pulse office hour chat is socialmediapulse.info/office hour August 11. And I'm going to throw that up as a ticker across the bottom here so that you can see that if you want to join us over the community. But regardless of where you're joining us from, so happy to have this conversation today about tracking traffic, specifically tracking traffic from social media. It's one of those things that I think if you work in social media or if you work in marketing, you kind of hear you have to measure what you're doing in order to justify, in order to improve and evaluate what's working, what's not. And UTM codes are a very easy way to do that. However, for a lot of social media marketers, they're also kind of confusing and they can be overwhelming. And if you haven't used them before, the idea of building out UTM codes and using UTM parameters can be really overwhelming. But never fear, that is exactly why we are here today. So today we're going to do a couple of different things. We are going to talk about UTM parameters. What are they? How do they work? What do they look like? Just kind of understand that. And then later, I'm going to be joined by a very special guest, my friend Teresa Anderson, who is head of marketing for a lot of different countries at Agorapulse, is going to join us to kind of talk about in marketing, how do you then use that data from UTM codes to inform your decisions and do a better job with social media marketing? So for just a second, I'm going to go ahead. I've got that ticker going. I'm also going to going to drop that link here in the chat on social in case you want to dive over to the community. There we go. So glad that you're joining us. Without further ado, let's talk about UTM codes for social media. We'll hide that ticker now. And here we are. We got the whole picture-in-picture action going. So as promised, we're first going to, there's a QR code, again, with that link to drive you over to Social Media Pulse community. But if you want to stay on Facebook or you want to stay on YouTube or you want to stay on LinkedIn, we're happy to have you there too. We're monitoring the chat in all the places. So let's first talk about what UTM codes are. So UTM, if we want to really pull back the curtain on a UTM code, UTMs are simply they stand for Urchin Tracking Modules. And Brianna Anderson, who is an expert at analytics and is a good friend of Agorapulse, she explains it as it's all the gobbledygook at the end of a URL. So I've got an example here in a minute that will help put it in context. You've seen them all the time. Anytime you click on particularly ads or organizations that are doing a good job tracking traffic from social media, you're going to see stuff at the end of a URL that defines and provides you, the person who owns that website, it helps you understand the source of that traffic, the medium of that traffic, the campaign that link was related to, and it helps you understand how and where traffic is coming to your site. And if you understand that, you can understand more about how to make decisions and what's working and what's not working. as far as anything that you're doing to promote your website across digital. Today, we're going to focus specifically on social media. So those UTM Urchin tracking module, it's called Urchin because way back in the day, I think back in 2005, so right about the time I was getting into social or getting into social media, Google bought a company called Urchin. Urchin on Demand, in fact, is what it was called. And that's why they've got the name Urchin right there in the name. But I kind of also like to think of it as it's a little urchin that's kind of looking at what's going on your website and where stuff's coming from, and it's helping you track. So a couple different ways to think about that. So this is what a UTM code or parameters, what the parameters, they're also called tags, they're also called labels. This is what it looks like at the end of a URL. So this is the part that comes after the .com or the .net, or in our case, the .community. Our domain is .community, but anything after that question mark is a UTM parameter. And so in this case, this example, the source of that traffic is Facebook. The medium through which that traffic came to the website is social media. And the specific campaign is that traffic is being driven from a Facebook page. We'll use some other examples today to kind of put it in a little bit more context, help you think about how you might use UTM codes for your campaigns or what you're doing online. But this is an example of what a UTM code looks like at the end of a URL. So you've probably seen these before. So UTM codes, they have 5 standard parameters. Really, most people are just using 3 of these. The other 2 are pretty optional. Most people are just using the first 3. So the UTM source, the medium, the campaign, the UTM content, and the UTM term. I have slides to explain each and every one of these, but these are the 5 main UTM parameters. If you have any questions as we go along the way, I'm pausing, I'm monitoring the chat. I think we've got a couple of people in the community who are monitoring as well. So definitely don't be afraid to join the conversation. And if you've got a question or a comment, go ahead and drop it there and we'll make sure that it gets addressed during the live presentation. And if you're watching the replay, go ahead, comment there as well, because we certainly are monitoring and want to engage. We're all about community at Social Media Pulse Community. So I'm actually going to start when I'm talking and defining each of the 5 UTM parameters with the second parameter that shows up in order when it shows up at the end of a URL, because I think it's the biggest bucket. When we talk about a medium, it's kind of the biggest bucket, and it's how that traffic gets to you. What is the type of traffic that's coming? Just truly the medium. When we think about mediums, and examples of that would be, is it organic traffic? Is it paid traffic? Is it social traffic from social media? Is it coming from your email? Is it coming from your blog? Kind of these big buckets of mediums that we use to drive traffic to a website. The good news about our conversation here today is that if we're talking about UTM codes specifically for social media, most likely every single one of the links that you create or the URLs that you build that have UTM codes, their medium will most likely be social. That's the big bucket. So underneath that, and the reason why I define medium first is because then we get a little bit more granular when we talk about the source of that traffic. So medium is just in general, how does that traffic get to you? So it's sort of like if we're talking about traveling, are you going to get there by airplane? Are you going to get there by car? Are you going to get there by bicycle? That would be the medium. And then the source would be maybe the specific route or the specific road that person is taking to get to you. So they're going to go down the interstate, or they're going to take the scenic route and go a different direction. So the source will be that specific channel. And of course, when I'm showing my slides here, it doesn't have the transitions because slide is supposed to build on itself and it's supposed to have the definition first and then the examples come up later, but they show up at once on this slide and that's okay. Those examples are, is the traffic coming from Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or Google or YouTube? I did throw one example in there that's not specifically social media, just to help us put it in context of how we can use UTM codes beyond social media. But, a newsletter might be another example of a source. And if you have 2 or 3 different newsletters, you could also name this, you know, monthly newsletter, quarterly newsletter, client newsletter, prospect newsletter. You can be as granular as you want. The thing about UTM codes, and we're going to talk about how to build them in a moment, is you have complete control over the words that you're using that show up in that parameter. So it's stuff that has to make sense for you and for your business or organization. So there's 3 main parameters that most people are using: source, medium, and the third that most people are using, or that you should use because you'll have gaps in your data if you don't, is campaign. And campaign is, why is that traffic coming to you? So, maybe if we're going to use our literal traffic example, right? They're coming by car, they're coming by plane, they're coming via American Airlines might be the channel, or, the I-35, that's the interstate closest to me. That might be the channel that people are coming to you through. The campaign might be, they're coming for a wedding. They're coming for a big sale. They're coming because there is an event that you're hosting. So people can physically come to you for a specific reason, and they might come to your website for a specific reason also. And that might be your product launch campaign. You've posted something on social media and it's related specifically to your product launch. So that's the specific campaign that someone saw that link on and clicked on that. Same thing. It might be, again, we're trying to keep the conversation today focused on social media, but it's hard to do that because it applies to digital in general. So it might also be an email newsletter, or maybe your newsletter is also being linked out from social. That could be something that you could do as well. So your monthly newsletter might be your campaign. In the instance of 2 examples that I use when I am putting out links for office hour, inviting people to events like today's live stream show, the campaign name I use is office hour. I want to know if I'm posting on, so a UTM code for a social media post about today's office hour might be, the source is social, the medium is Facebook, the campaign is office hour. Or another example of a UTM campaign parameter that I use is when I am personally posting links to my personal social media, driving people to the Social Media Pulse community to join our community. We have a campaign that's just invite-Ruth, and I know that I can attribute that to that particular link that I shared, driving traffic back to our community. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if we have any kind of comments in the community or on social media, or questions that people have about these 3 most common UTM parameters. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up. I've been having, just as an aside, I was chatting with Teresa, my guest today, beforehand. I have been having a little bit of trouble with Chrome lately. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the conversation in the community in a different browser because it's not wanting to refresh for me. That's the thing about live shows. Sometimes you have to do stuff on the fly. There we go. I've got it there. Hit refresh. Okay. So as a recap, UTM codes are the things at the end of a URL, question mark, and you're going to define after that, the part that comes after that, you're defining where traffic is coming from, how that traffic is getting to you, why they're coming to you, and a couple of optional things that you can also define in a UTM code would be content. And that piece is most marketers don't use this particular parameter, but it would be an optional field. So if you have multiple links to the same in the same campaign, or two links in the same email that go to the same place, and you're wondering if the link at the top of the email performs better than the link at the bottom of the email, etc., you can use a content parameter. It's optional. It's usually more information than most people need, but I will give you an example of how we have used, or I have used, the UTM content parameter for stuff on Social Media Pulse. Is, the campaign that we use for office hour is called Office Hour, but we do the show weekly and we're sharing it a lot of different places. And so sometimes I will use a content parameter to identify which specific office hour um, topic that I'm linking to help further, granularize, if that's a word, your information that you're getting. And then the fifth and final, and even less frequently used UTM parameter that's still considered a standard parameter, but it's really, really almost archaic at this point, is called the UTM term parameter. That's rarely used because that's related to keywords. And Google Analytics and Google Ads do a great job of helping us understand what keywords are driving traffic to our site. And so it's very rarely used. All right. So those are the five UTM parameters that when taken together, we call that a UTM code. And that's all well and good. And it probably makes sense to us. Like, yeah, it's great to know where our traffic is coming from, how they're getting there, why they're coming, why they're clicking. But how the heck do I actually use this on social media? How do I use this to track traffic specifically from social media? So I'm so glad that you asked that. So here's a reminder of what that UTM tracking code at the end of a URL looks like that I showed at the beginning, that probably has some more context now that we've defined what UTM source is, what UTM medium means, and campaign. I will tell you again, I personally get so annoyed that source comes before medium, because if we're thinking about it as a funnel, about kind of big buckets of information down to more granular data, medium should come first, source should come second, campaign should come third. So if anyone wants to take up that fight with Google with me to say, switch the order of how this appears, I'd be happy to have the support there, because this annoys me, because medium is a more broad bucket than source. Source is more specific. But that is a digression. I digress. Here's what it actually looks like when you are finding, or you are wanting to see what that data looks like on your website. So this is a screenshot of the Google Analytics dashboard. So it's just right there on the left-hand navigation of Google Analytics. The key that I forgot to mention earlier, in order for this to work, in order for you to be able to use the information from UTM codes, you have to have Google Analytics set up on your website. Very easy to install, free to install. That's not what today's lesson is about, but you have to have Google Analytics set up on your website. So to find out how traffic is getting to your website, what campaigns are performing, you go to the acquisition tab on Google Analytics, go down to campaigns, you can click on all campaigns, and then you can look that by default campaign is going to be and this is very, very tiny. Hopefully you can put this full screen if you're watching this on a smaller device, or even if you're watching it on a computer like I am. This is kind of tiny, but campaign by default will show up and it will tell you the top performing campaigns for whatever time period you have selected. And this is a real behind the scenes look at the social media pulse community Google Analytics and the campaigns that are the most trafficked campaigns. I think this was like the last month, I think is what I set the parameters for here. So we've got some up here at the top that are a little bit more less language based. And the reason why is that we do have a couple of more sophisticated campaigns that are part of larger Agorapulse campaigns. But then these down here that are more in kind of regular English just help us understand. Like, I'm sending an email every week to our legacy social media manager school members, and that legacy-SMMS campaign, it'll tell me how many users have clicked through, and then I can track and see exactly what those specific users did after they were on our website. We've got goals set up in our Google Analytics, and I can know users from this particular campaign, if they got to our website from this campaign, did they sign up to become a member? Did they spend more than a certain amount of time on a page? The different goals that we have set up for our website, goals that you have for your website might be different. That's an example of what the campaign parameters look like reporting in Google Analytics. The next one would be source. And so we can see that Facebook is the most popular source. Our information email is the third most popular. Newsletters, fourth most popular. Someone said, I've always wondered what UTM stood for, LOL. So that is something that, yeah, fun little fact. Urchin tracking module is what it stands for. And somebody else says campaign equals Y. That's a great way to think about it. That's how I like to think about it. Is why are they coming here? What prompted the campaign is what prompted that person to click that link. And then finally, here back to the Google Analytics piece that we're going through. The medium would be, in this case, those bigger buckets. You can see here we've actually got some discrepancies in how we are defining our UTM parameters. We've got social with a capital S and social with a lowercase s, and it's splitting those out when they're reporting on that. But we know it's social media. Pause for a minute. I'm going to take a look here at the comments and see what other comments we might have. Okay, our fearless leader, Paul Bradley, is in the comments on social, also on the community post, that social media pulse.info/office-hour-august-18, or pro tip, go to socialmediapulse.community, hit the magnifying glass, search office hour, and it'll be there. We have good search functionality on our website. You can find it that way there as well without navigating specifically through that URL. Okay, so we've talked about what a UTM code is. We've talked and defined some pieces of a UTM code. We've talked about what it might look like when you're getting data from that UTM code in Google Analytics. We have not talked about how to actually create a UTM code. How do you put this in action? And we also haven't talked about how the heck do you use that data and why is that data important? So that's what we're going to cover here in the second half of Office Hour. First, how do you create them? We know we wanted to find the source. We know we wanted to find the medium. We know we wanted to find the campaign. But if you're creating them for the first time, how the heck do you do it? The most common way free way, since it does tie in to Google Analytics and your reporting, Google has a campaign builder that you can use to actually build these for free. And I actually have a link to the Google Campaign Builder that I will drop into the comments here on social. Paul, if you want to help us out and drop that link as a comment in the community, that would be great. But this is a screenshot. Again, it's kind of small on my screen, but a screenshot of what that looks like. And it's really, you are just defining like, what is the URL of the page that you're going to be linking to, and you're defining the source, the medium, the campaign. The other things are optional, but at least those three, it's really important to include information in the field for all three of those every time you're creating a UTM code. This is the easiest way to do it. It's free, it's on Google, but it does come with some downsides. And the downsides there are that you don't really have a comprehensive record. The URLs can get long and unruly, and it's hard to make them pretty. So there are some other tools that you can use to build UTM codes and parameters. Those tools are things like spreadsheets. If you were to Google free UTM spreadsheet builder, you could probably find some templates to help you build a UTM code. And usually what those templates involve is they've got a column for each of the parameters, a column for source, a column for medium, a column for campaign, a place for you to add the original link. And then there's a formula that is built out that will take all of that information and put it together in that string with the question marks and the equal signs in the right places and in the right order. So spreadsheets are a way that you can create and track the different campaigns that you're using for UTM codes. Other things that you can use are link shorteners. Specifically, usually if you have the paid version of the link shortener, you can create UTM campaigns or parameters right from there. So you're doing two things. You're making the URL pretty, but you're also adding UTM tracking data to it at the same time. So tools like Bitly or Rebrandly, they do a couple of different things. They help you shorten your link and make it prettier, and you also can add UTM parameters to those links. Facebook has a URL builder, and of course the intent is that they want you to use that. They want you to use sorry, I was looking for the link for that one. I thought I had the link for that one that I could drop into the comments. But of course, they want you to use that link on Facebook, right? They've provided the tool. But once the link is built, you can copy it and use it across other social media channels. That Facebook URL builder, I don't have the link for it handy. I might find it here in a minute and drop it into the comments. It works a lot like the Google example that I just showed. So Facebook URL builder. The fourth would be a CRM tool. If you work at an organization that is large enough and lucky enough to have a customer relationship management software tool like HubSpot or Salesforce or Zoho or a handful of others, a lot of times they have URL builders, again, that work really similar to the Google URL builder example I just showed you. And all of those are great. But all of those, the spreadsheets, the link shorteners, the CRM tools, it requires you to do a couple of different steps before you're actually using those on social media. You have to create the URL and create the UTM parameters somewhere over here. And then when you're ready to share that link on social media, you're going to have to copy and paste, oftentimes a very ugly link, into your social media unless you're using a link shortener to do it. So in comes Agorapulse, a tool that's near and dear to our heart here at Social Media Pulse community because we're part of the Agorapulse organization, but also just independently of that, is the only social media management software tool that helps you create those UTM codes right in your social media management tool and therefore track the ROI of your social media. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'm not the expert at that particular tool, and I'm not the expert at why that is so important for social media, but I've got somebody who is an expert who's going to join me here in just a moment. So I'm getting ready to bring on screen Teresa Anderson. Mentioned her at the top of the hour, but Teresa is head of marketing for the US, Canada, Australia, and I think now maybe the UK too. So she covers a lot of geography for us at Agorapulse. She's the head of marketing for those countries. She hails from sunny Key West. I hope it's sunny today. Hails from Key West. But what Teresa is responsible for is that she is supporting that growing client base at Agorapulse. And she's worked in-house for corporate marketing teams and marketing agencies. She was a program director for the Center for Entrepreneurship at Rollins College. So we both have a little bit of the academia background and working in that space. But Teresa I'm happy to have her join me to discuss UTM for social. So, hey.
Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Good.
Good.
All
This
right.
has been a great presentation. I think you've done a great service to your audience with this.
Oh, thank you. You had to wait in the green room in the wings for a very long time. So thank you so much for your patience. I think I promised at the top of the hour I was going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes, and it was 33. So typical me, got a little long-winded.
UTMs are complicated. I think you did a really good job of breaking it down. And I think breaking it down to that degree takes a little bit of time to make it palatable, to make it seem like it's doable. Otherwise, it just seems, like you said, like a big long string of mess. How do we make sense of that? How do we make that practical? It's tough.
Mm-hmm. It does. And even if and I will admit this, even if you've worked in marketing for a while, if you weren't the one that was actively kind of getting your hands in there and building it, it doesn't really make sense until you've actively done it. And that was something that we learned through some polling that we did recently. We did some polling in the community. The Agorapulse organization did some polling. And I think for those of us who use UTM codes, we're like, oh, yeah, we got to use them. Right. But a lot of people don't, because it's just a little bit overwhelming, right?
It's a little bit overwhelming. And if you have never done it before, it's not even on your radar. There's so many things to think about when you're doing a social media campaign. There's so many moving parts. Mm-hmm. If you add clients into that, and client approvals and client needs and client wants, and it might not even occur to you that this is something to add to your plate to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll tell a little story about myself, and then I've got a couple of questions for you. I very, very, very infrequently will consult and help with friends or small businesses that work in social media or marketing, right? Just because I think once it's in your blood, and once you're an expert or pseudo expert about something, you like sometimes flexing those muscles. And I did a social media audit recently for a small business. And until this morning, it's not completed yet, but even me, I knew I was doing this presentation this week. I was working on that over the weekend and didn't even think to suggest to this organization to use UTM codes to track back to their website. So of course I'm going to go back and edit my audit. But even I'm guilty of kind of overlooking it. You're right, because there's so many moving parts.
And what's the math, like the you have to do something 21 times before it becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. I think until you do it enough times where it becomes habitual, that it just becomes part of your process. I think a lot of times it's just a process hurdle to get over. And to out myself, when we started this whole call today and discussing this, I hadn't created a UTM code so we could see how well this session performed. I actually had to make one on the fly right before I came on. So me too. It's a muscle that I have to get better at using too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, in the spirit of that, it's hard to remember. There's a lot of moving parts. Why is it so important though? Like, even though it's hard, why is it important?
It's super important. And I'm gonna kind of draw a parallel here. It'd be the same thing like placing money on an ad and not knowing how the ad performed. So you wouldn't know if you should put more money there. Did it work? Did it not work? Should I put less money there? Should I try something different? It really is the same thing. If you think of an organic social media post, you're creating that post to get your audience to do something. You want them to visit your website and download a paper. You want them to check out your catalog and see if there's a product that they find interesting. There's something you want them to do when you make that post on organic social. And if you don't use the UTM tracking codes, then you can't tell if what you're doing has been productive. So you're really in the dark.
Yeah, like it reminds me of the early days of digital and really all of the days of print. You know, you're
and TV.
And TV, and you're spending all this money, like newspaper ads even, you know, you spend all this money and they're like, well, our circulation is this much, and people probably saw it. You know, we have such sophisticated capabilities now. Let's take advantage of that.
Right. There's a ton of data available to the modern marketer. And it's almost, I personally call it like the Chinese menu. It's just overwhelming. There's so many choices. It's like overwhelming. The reality is we almost are we are almost victim to this plethora of data. Like there's almost too much, you know, to choose from. What am I going to prioritize? What am I going to put my energy into? And I can tell you, as a basic founding principle, if you can get your arms around UTM codes, it's a lot of bang for your data buck. It's a lot of bang for your process buck. You create that UTM code and you can get really, as you said, very granular about how things are performing, which once you know how it's performing, you know how you should proceed.
To play devil's advocate a little bit though, and because things that I hear from people that I work with or people that I know is, how is that any different than what Facebook is telling me about how many people clicked on that link? If the social media platforms themselves are providing analytics and telling us click-through rates, why do we need a UTM code?
So I think that the answer to that is in how campaigns really work in real life, how social media works in real life. So you're ideally running a campaign trying to get people to do something on multiple platforms, which makes Google Analytics a really great place to track that, because Google can track all that traffic coming into your website. A UTM code, if you create a UTM code, you don't have to log into Facebook to get Facebook's data. You don't have to then log into LinkedIn to get LinkedIn data. You can see all of that information from that Google Analytics dashboard. You can see now how that traffic is coming in from all the different channels, not one channel at a time. And also, too, a lot of times when that traffic comes in, if you're just wanting to use Google Analytics without a UTM code, you might be able to see that all that traffic is coming from Facebook, but you don't know which post it's coming from. You don't know who posted it, or especially if you're using like influencers, you're going to want to know, hey, that post was featuring Janet, our influencer, who performed much better than Bob, our influencer, which again is going to allow you to make real, powerful, impactful, budgetary, real life decisions about where you're going to put your money for that next round of campaign.
Yeah, like Facebook is going to track what they do on Facebook, and when they leave Facebook, Facebook says, I don't care. They left. We don't want them. In fact, they don't want them to leave, but they're not tracking them through to what they do on your website after they leave Facebook. So, okay, I'm looking at a couple of different comments here. And Mariella, about understanding UTM codes and trying them and getting a little bit overwhelmed. I absolutely understand that, which is why I hope that today, I'm not a UTM like guru by any means. I'm the example of the typical person who does some social media marketing, but I also am responsible for some data and reporting. And so figuring out how to really make them usable and understandable. So hopefully today's presentation and today's conversation helps. But Teresa, I think I'm going to go ahead and let's spoil it a little bit with
Okay.
talking about, if it's still a little bit confusing to you,
Mhm.
at the end of today's office hour, Teresa has a great offer for free, for us to learn a little bit more. I'll let you. I teed it up for you, Teresa. What's the offer?
Well, so Agorapulse, knowing this is a big pain point for our audience, for our clients, we invested in a Christopher Penn workshop. And if anybody here is familiar with Christopher Penn, he is the data guy. If you're in social media, Christopher Penn, he's the guy that knows data. So we asked Chris to develop this program for us. It is very robust, but accessible. He does a really good job of showcasing what UTM can do, and practically what you need to do to get it done, how to set it up properly. And he even shows you when it's not the right course of action. And I think we placed the value at like $500 for this course. And because of our love for the Pulse community, we're going to put this link here to make sure that every single person in the Pulse Academy can take that course for free if they'd like to.
Thank you so much, because you're absolutely right, Mariella. You're absolutely right, Teresa, that it can be kind of overwhelming. So I actually just threw that link up there. I put it in the comments, in social, and then right here on the screen, that free Chris Penn workshop. It's bit.ly/pulsecp. You can go there, get that free workshop. And I will say, yeah, I mentioned I'm not a huge analytics nerd. I mean, I like data. I'm probably a little bit more data oriented than the average, but Chris is on another level.
Yeah, for sure.
But he can make it really, really accessible. Chris is actually on our social media advisory board for Social Media Pulse community, and he shares his insights and knowledge, with us
Great.
and freely in our community. He's a great friend to anyone who works in social, because he has great knowledge and is so willing to share that and put it on a level that's accessible.
Right.
So this workshop, I've been through it. It's great. Definitely for those watching the replay or watching live, free course, might as well check it out. So that Chris Penn workshop.
And just to let everybody know, we did bake our UTM data into that link. So we're going to know that that came from the Pulse community. So there you go. Right there, eating, what is it? Eating our own dog food? Is that drinking our own Kool-Aid?
Yeah, drinking our own Kool-Aid. Maybe drinking our own Kool-Aid. I like that one a little bit better.
No,
Sounds a little more appetizing.
I don't know. I'm not sure which one is better for you. I don't know. I don't think you're going to hear from the Kool-Aid company, but yeah, I'm not sure which one's better for you.
Oh, goodness. I have a couple more questions for you,
Sure.
Teresa. As a head of marketing for a large organization, I think sometimes the other comment that I hear from people that I know and have worked with, who work with smaller organizations or organizations that aren't necessarily e-commerce, like I think it's really easy to think about, oh, you're selling something. You're trying to drive someone to a traffic or to a product page or a checkout page or an offer. Tracking that traffic from social is important. But why would someone who is not a e-commerce type business, or business that's doing a lot of revenue on their website, why would they want to track social media traffic through to their website?
I think we're all on social media for our own purposes. We're all on there to, some of us are on there to just share, pictures of our puppies and our kids. That's valid. But for most social media managers, they're on there with a goal. Even if that goal is not revenue producing, there's a goal there. I want you to go visit the page of my, dog rescue and check out the dogs that are available. I want you to go over here and read this guidebook that I wrote about doing makeup better, or whatever that is. There's a whole lot of things that we post on social media. And most of them, I would say, if you're a professional or not, you want people to do something with that information that you've given them. You're asking them to do something. So I think if you want people to do anything, if that's your motivation, you want them to do an action after reading what you've posted, then there is a case for you using a UTM code. Because if you don't use the UTM code, then you are literally throwing that into the wind and hoping for the best, like we used to do with Reach on television. Back to the old timers that remember that. So if you want to take advantage of the data that's available to you, if you want to be able to plot your course based on knowledge and data and surety and a good feeling that you are putting effort in that's getting a result, or also, I mean, realistically, if it's not getting a result, you need to know that too. You know, I mean, the reality is that even the information that isn't what we want allows us to change course and change action and not throw good money after bad or good effort after bad or however. So I would tell you, no matter what you're doing, I would say separate from the idea of a UTM code revenue and sales. Separate from that and attribute to a UTM code that it's going to allow you to track the actions and the behavior of the people that you are investing so much time and energy into.
I love that. And I will repeat that. Separate from the idea of a UTM code revenue. It's not. So I think people a lot of times, because a lot of times when we talk about UTM codes, we're talking about ROI, return on investment, and people think dollars and cents when they think about ROI. But ROI is not always revenue. It is, are people doing the things on your website that you want them to do? Because as we know in marketing, social media is rental property. Your website is your owned property. You want to, while you're using that tool of social media, really where your organization is going to thrive is when people are on your website that you own.
Right. And I would say when you said return on investment, think of return on investment of your time and energy as well. I mean, the reality is you're spending time and energy to create this beautiful content for people. And you need to know whether it's being productive or not, whether your time and energy is being well spent.
So speaking of time and energy being well spent, the Agorapulse product has a built-in ability to create these UTM codes directly in the tool. So you don't have to go to the Google URL builder. You don't have to go to a cumbersome spreadsheet with really complicated formulas. Can you tell me a little bit about that tool, Teresa?
I can. And this is really, if you want to make your life simple, Mariella, the learning curve, if you want to simplify that learning curve, if you want to, I think really too, the big deal is that you talked about using spreadsheets. I don't know about the rest of you, but every single time I copy and paste something, I run the risk of making a mistake. One letter gets dropped, one piece doesn't copy. If, that adds a margin of error that having it all inside of the platform eliminates. So by creating it in the platform and not having to copy and paste it, just that alone is, saving you a lost time and energy of making a mistake just in the copy and pasting. But on top of that, what's great about it is, Ruth, if I create a campaign code, a UTM code, and then 3 weeks later, you want to go back in and promote that same thing in the same way and use the same UTM code, that code is there in a drop down for you. So you don't have to, what did Teresa say? Dig through the spreadsheet. It makes it very easy to share things. So that's another big advantage, that you're creating it right in the tool. You're not in the platform. You're not copying and pasting it, running that risk of margin of error. You're sharing it with your team members, again, in a drop down, so there's no margin of error. And you're able to apply it to all of your properties, all of your social media profiles from one place, without any copy and pasting, without any separate logging in and logging out. And then the big exciting piece is you push one button and all that data gets aggregated into a beautiful, pretty report that you can share with your boss, you can share with your stakeholders, you can share with your client, you can share with your friend that you're helping them, launch their business on social. All of a sudden now you've got this very easy, automatically compiled data around how that performed. And you didn't have to do anything other than build the UTMs within the platform.
So I have a screenshot that just puts into context. It's a screenshot of the back end of our social media pulse Agorapulse instance for lack of a better word. And I'm going to throw that up on the screen, Teresa. I'm going to throw that up on the screen. And if you could talk through kind of what we're looking at here, that I think seeing things always helps me.
Yeah,
so I'm going to go ahead and put that up. And there. If you could explain what we're looking at here.
Yes. So this is, again, just what's nice about this is that it's all teed up for you and very logical. So you're asked to put in your campaign name, which again is forming that, that uniform tracking to an actual action that you're trying to make. So you're naming that campaign. That campaign is now labeled. It can be shared. Let's say that you've got, like, for in your case, you're using this Academy as your campaign name. Now, if you promote the Academy campaign is promoted on any platform, you're going to be able to easily see how that campaign performed no matter where you distributed it. So that is really the unifying name that's going to make it really easy for you to track this activity back to an actual campaign. So we start with that. You can then make that default if you want to with that box. So again, it won't even prompt you. It'll just be the default one. Every single UTM would have that. But in this case, if you want to make sure that you're able to customize it for each UTM you create, you move right on to building the parameter. You did such a good job of describing this, Ruth, but you put your source down. So you, in your case, you're using social. Medium here could be which social platform you're creating the UTM for. So again, you've got Academy, that's your campaign. You run that campaign on social, and the medium then could be on Facebook. And then, of course, it's the Academy campaign. And then if you want to run it on a social network, but this time you want to run it on Twitter, but still the same campaign is Academy. Now, when you go look at your data, you're going to be able to see which social media networks and platforms performed the best for you. So you'll be able to clearly see in black and white, Facebook resulted in this, Twitter resulted in this, and that was all determined and broken out for you right here in this decision-making on this form that pops up right inside of the tool. So super easy, could not be easier.
Could not be easier. I speak from experience, and that's why I pulled up this screenshot. And I might actually, we've got a couple of minutes here at the end, I might pull up like a little bit of a more of a real-time example also. The thing that I would like to point out for those who are watching who have experience creating UTM codes with spreadsheets, or B, don't have experience with doing this at all, one of the things that is a huge game changer about this particular screen that we're looking at here is that source, that source parameter. This is what's so cool. It will, the Agorapulse tool, if I'm publishing the same piece of content and I'm kind of bulk publishing, I'm publishing content with tweaks because we all need to have it personalized per social media platform. But if I've been publishing the same link to Facebook, to LinkedIn, to Twitter, various other places, it will, you create the link tracking one time just with one click, but it will automatically say source Facebook, source Instagram, source Twitter. And I don't have to, if I know I'm going to publish the link to 3 different social media platforms, I don't have to create 3 different UTM codes. And if you've done that and created 3 different UTM codes before, you know how much of a pain in the ass that is. And if you haven't, you won't have to deal with it if you're using this particular tool. So that is something that that is really, really useful as a practitioner.
That really is a great point. I'm glad that you highlighted that specifically. But yes, that is awesome. And then the ability to use the shortener right inside of that platform too. You can then make it shorter and prettier, and you don't have to leave and come back. And you don't have to log out and then log back in to make something short. You can shorten it right there from inside of the platform.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to. I think I've got. There we go. Got to get rid of that one. So real-time example here in the final few minutes of this is what the publishing composer looks like in Agorapulse. And let's say that I want to post something again on Facebook. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn. I'm going to put it on Twitter. And I'm also going to put it into a Facebook group. And I've got an example of a URL that I want to share. Obviously, that's not a real URL. Let's come up with a real one. Yeah. I need to be a faster typer. Socialmediapulse.community. And I'm sharing to that link. It's pulling up our link preview for us, and it's telling me that it's untracked. If I wanted to shorten this link and track it, here are the various campaigns that we have predefined that, as Teresa mentioned, we can, be piggybacking off of campaigns that we already have predefined, or we can create a new campaign and define things there. But it's very, very simple. And when this gets published, it not only publishes it with the UTM parameters, it also publishes it with a pretty short link. So it's not socialmediapulse.community source equals this, equal, and it's got a pretty URL, a short URL with it. So that's a real-time example. I'd use this every time I create a link on social media, and it really, really is easy to use. So in summary about UTM codes for social media, they're important because it is important to know if someone is visiting you on social media and then coming to your website, it helps you understand what got them there, why they came, and what they're doing on the website after. And data is really important to help us make informed decisions. We can no longer just sit by and say, social media is important to our organization because it's pretty and fun. We have to be able to justify what social media is doing to drive our organizational goals. So that's the first thing. UTM codes are important. The second thing is they don't have to be hard and complicated. You can manually build them. You don't have to use a spreadsheet. You don't have to use a tool. You could actually, if you know that formula for UTM _source equals this, you can build them by hand. But we have great tools that help make that easier. Free tools, paid tools, all kinds of tools. And the third thing is if you're still confused about it, you're still a little bit overwhelmed, that is exactly why the Social Media Pulse community and Pulse Academy exists. Because we've got a great community. Social media community in general is a generous community with sharing knowledge and information and helping, that rising tide raises all boats type of philosophy that really we take to heart at Social Media Pulse community. So if you've still got questions about it, we've got some on this particular thread in the Social Media Pulse community. We have links to a few resources, that free course from Chris Penn, and always, 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 you have the ability to ask questions in the community chat or reach out to myself or Teresa specifically. So don't be afraid. UTM codes are useful. You should be using them. And I'm happy to be a part of that journey if you decide to start using them today. So thanks a bunch for joining me today, Teresa.
Thank you for having me, Ruth. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy that you provided this important information for the community. So it's awesome. Thank you.
Yay. So for everyone watching, again, if you're watching live, thank you so much for sticking it out for the full hour. If you're watching the replay, let us know what your favorite part was, or if you have any questions, and see us next Thursday. I can't even know. I think, no, we're actually not. Okay. We're not live for office hour next week, August 25th, because the Agorapulse Agency Summit is being held next Thursday, August 25th. Right. And I'm going to be going to that. And you should too. So also go to the community, search for Agency Summit in the search bar. And we have an offer for free VIP access to the Agorapulse Agency Summit. So I'll see you back for office hour in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, go create some UTM codes.
Bye, guys. Good luck. Bye.